In this lesson, you'll learn how to write effective prompts. Prompting, promptowani, and prompt are terms that are being used everywhere across the internet and media. You've probably already heard about it. Prompting is simply a way of communicating with artificial intelligence. A text-based way, because there are actually several ways to do this. And soon you'll see that you can also communicate with artificial intelligence using images. If you're interested in the topic of communicating with AI, I encourage you to watch my YouTube video, Communicating with AI, What is Prompting? There, I go into these topics in a bit more detail. Here, I'll limit myself to practical examples related to flux context. So, to repeat, a prompt is a text instruction expressed in English, which the model interprets and returns an image. Below are a few examples. Each of these images was created based on a specific prompt. Some are short, expressed in natural language. Others use only phrases or keywords separated by commas, and still others use poetic, elaborate descriptions. There are as many ways to prompt as there are users. I'll try to present to you some basic principles. If you stick to them, you're sure to get great results. Let's start with a simple prompt. Nice interior Scandinavian style. This is a format that artificial intelligence reads in its own way, using tokens. I'm now in a special tool called Tokenizer, which converts the prompt into a number of tokens. Flux context probably interprets these tokens a bit differently, but here you can clearly see how artificial intelligence works. It doesn't fully understand what I'm writing, but it treats each word as a token. Nice and interior are two separate tokens. A comma is also considered a token. It tells the artificial intelligence something. Scandinavian, as you can see, is actually split into 3 tokens, and style is separate. So from 4 simple words, I end up with 7 tokens. A token is the smallest unit of information that has its own representation for the model in a special space. Each token is positioned at a certain distance from the others, and by connecting them, the model gradually understands better what result it should produce. It does this based on what it has learned. That's how it works, in a nutshell. If I were to generate an image following this prompt right now, it would look more or less like this. It really does have a Scandinavian style. A lot of white wicker natural colors, but the result might be a bit generic. Let's try it a little differently. I'll use a more complex prompt. Okay, there's a lot more going on here. If I put this into the tokenizer, it turns out that the whole prompt is 200 tokens. Be careful not to let your prompts exceed 500 tokens. That's the absolute maximum amount of data that Flux Context can effectively process. When I generate an image with a prompt that has been carefully prepared like this, I can genuinely expect something quite significantly different, much more specific and detailed, which is incredibly beneficial for achieving precise visual outcomes. Better? Yes, I think I can say that. Architectural styles are quite a complex topic, and the Scandinavian style describes really different spaces, just like the Memphis style, eclectic, vintage, or glamour. These terms are very nuanced, and if you care about a specific effect, it's worth following a certain principle. I'll break this down into 7 parts. Part 1, type of space, a bedroom. Earlier, we didn't specify what kind of space it should be. Part 2, style and aesthetics. A minimalist, calm, introspective mood. Part 3. The most important compositional elements. A low oak bed, a rug, symmetrical nightstands, delicate black lamps. It's also worth describing the decorative elements here. The more precise we are, the better Flux Context will understand our intention. Part 4 is materials and textures. We have soft linen, natural shades, plaster, and oak. Notice that I use a lot of adjectives. Elegant, decorative, subtle, natural, or dramatic. Such poetic descriptions yield great results. Part 5 is lighting, natural light coming in from the right side with subtle shadows highlighting the textures of the surfaces. 6 is the camera setup, a side view at human eye level. It's worth adding some photographic technical details here, lens width, aperture settings, and even the specific camera brand. This will make it easier for the model to understand what we expect from it. In point 7, I further emphasize quality and details. Finally, I care about achieving the highest possible quality, typical for publications in industry magazines. If there's anything else I care about, it's worth mentioning it in this section. I wrote about focusing on light, texture, and harmony. When creating such a prompt, use rich and elaborate vocabulary. Avoid vague adjectives. Prioritize what makes the space unique. Establish a hierarchy. Start with what's most important and gradually move on to the details. Think of your instruction as a precise, visual, and purposeful plan. You can apply these rules to any kind of generation, not just those related to interiors. Let's take this architectural prompt as an example. Instead of describing a bedroom, I describe the building's volume, and instead of furniture, the facade material. I put greater emphasis on the environment, vegetation, scale, and surroundings. And the result is just as impressive. You'll find more examples in the materials attached to this course. Be sure to check them out, and now that we've covered the basics, let's move on to prompting in practice. In the previous lesson, I gave you the perfect recipe for a prompt. In this one, I'd like to show you what prompting looks like in practice and how to speed up the whole process using popular artificial intelligence models. No one in their right mind would write such an elaborate 7-point prompt by themselves these days. GPT, Gemini, Claude, or Grok can easily do this for you. In the materials attached to this course, you'll find a universal prompt that you can use to create your own scene. Just copy it and paste it into the chat. I use ChatGPT, but any large language model, LLM, will work similarly. You just need to provide some general assumptions. In my case, it's an artistic attic with cobalt accents. I hit enter and ChatGPT generates an elaborate prompt. All you have to do is copy it and transfer it to Flux. Enter. I instantly get 4 results that look excellent. For comparison, we can see what it would look like if we didn't expand the prompt. So let's check the basic prompt. It's not bad either. However, these particular results seem a little bit more stock-like and perhaps even generic to me. Still, this is also a very viable method that might perfectly suit some users and their specific needs. You can also prompt using keywords. ChatGPT made this a bit easier for me by highlighting the most important features of this room, so instead of building full sentences, we can create keywords separated by commas. Sloped ceilings, key pieces of furniture such as an incredibly comfortable and generously overstuffed linen sofa in a soft ivory hue, and intricate photographic details like a classic 35mm lens or the precise camera position all contribute to the overall aesthetic. Slightly elevated corner angle. This way, it's easier to control the image, make changes, and quickly prototype your instructions, because you can clearly see what is where. Just remember to avoid generalities. Nice interior, good lighting, these are not good keywords. Pastel appliances next to a black and yellow palette can simply get mixed up, so it's better to avoid specifying colors too precisely. Phrases like DSLR or global illumination work well, as they help define the direction of your images. However, even such a workflow should have a certain hierarchy. So first, living room, ceilings, then some furniture style, rough plaster walls, lighting, view, photographic elements. A prompt improved in this way will yield even more diverse results, and its greatest advantage is undoubtedly the ease of editing, because slightly elevated corner angle will mean that the camera is at an angle. However, if I were to choose the front view angle or the view eye height camera angle option, I would consistently obtain a clear and distinct frontal perspective, which is quite evidently and easily visible across all of these various generations of the models. Many users appreciate this keyword-based approach. As you can see, the whole prompting process is quite an individual matter. It's worth adapting my universal tips to your own needs. It's a bit like with language. Everyone has their own unique style and communicates in a slightly different way. So try to find your own prompting format through experimentation, which I strongly encourage you to do. Besides text, you can also communicate with artificial intelligence using images. And that's what this lesson will be about. Let's imagine that I want to get an image like this. A mirror designed by the Polish brand Urok. So I could download this image and then upload it to ChatGPT. I'm adding the photo. Great. And I use a universal prompt. You'll find it in the materials attached to this course. All you need to do is select it, copy it, and paste it into the chat. After receiving the instructions, it will carefully analyze the photo and return a prompt that again follows these 7 basic principles. ChatGPT and other LLMs interpret photos very well. Let's check how Flux Context handles this type of prompt. I paste it in and generate. As a result, I get an effect that's really close to the original input. This is a good way to generate personalized inspirations or different versions of the products or interiors you're designing. However, Flux Context, and this is its main advantage over the competition, doesn't need such descriptions because it can interpret a photo directly. Let's see this with the example of Pani Jurek. I add an image reference. I paste a simple prompt that says to place this mirror in some interior, and as a result, I get a ready-made product photo. It would probably make sense to adjust the scale a bit more, but we're really on the right track now. We'll deal with image editing and a more advanced approach to them in the next chapter. For now, I'd like to stick with this kind of soft inspiration. So instead of such a precise prompt, I'm using a description of a large round ceramic mirror, which was of course created by GPT. I'm using the same technique as before, so I have the full prompt, but I'm also using image reference. If I generate an image now, it will clearly be a combination of the text instructions and the visual suggestion. This is really a great way to look for inspiration and prototype ideas. I'm sure you'll find some interesting uses for this technique. It's worth remembering that images should have a minimum resolution of 10 to 24 pixels. Of course, Flux Context also handles smaller images very well, but it was trained on higher resolutions. That's why, if you want to make the most of it, upload large images. They also shouldn't be too complex. Flux Context reads context exceptionally well. But if the context is complicated even for a human, then artificial intelligence will have an even harder time handling it. It's important to make sure that the images have clear contrast and aren't too dark. So the image should be large, bright, and easy to understand. We'll talk a bit more about images in the 3rd chapter. In the meantime, let's move on to the next lesson, which is dedicated to generation settings. In this lesson, we'll take a closer look at the settings in Flux Context. You can find the settings by clicking on the 3 dots. But before we get to that, let's focus on the model. When it comes to Flux Context, you can choose between Context Pro and Context Max. Later in the course, you'll also see the Context Dev model, which has been made available for free by Black Forest Labs for you to download and run locally on your own device. In Chapter 5, you'll also find a lesson dedicated to all of these models. For now, let's focus on 2 of them, Context Pro and Context Max. According to Black Forest Labs, the Max model offers maximum performance, ideal prompt following, accurate typography reproduction, and high speed. Context Pro is faster, but its quality is slightly lower, although these differences are practically unnoticeable during regular use. For you, the biggest difference will come down to the number of tokens. The Max model will require a lot more of them, which means that creating images with this model is simply more expensive. I suggest you check for yourself whether you really need it. We'll do a comparison in a moment, but first, let's talk a bit more about the settings. The first one, aspect ratio, is the proportion of the generated image. By default, it's 16:9, but you can choose from 7 popular aspect ratios. 1:1, the square format, is also very popular. Vertical formats like 3:4, 9:16, or 9:21 work perfectly for social media. I think I'll stick with 3:4. Batch size is the number of images generated. If I choose 1, then with the first batch, after clicking generate, only 1 image will be created. I can control this. By default, there are 4 images, but I'll reduce it to 2. This way, you'll be able to save some tokens. Because each batch means an additional cost. Safety tolerance works like a sensor. The default value of 2 will be suitable for most uses. If you work in architecture or design, it's not even worth changing this. A safety tolerance of 0 will be the least tolerant. This means it won't create content that could be considered inappropriate. If you're designing a single family house with a swimming pool and you envision a woman in a swimsuit relaxing by the pool, I would then increase the safety tolerance to 6, which means the model will be very tolerant and will generate images with a woman in a bikini. So adjust this parameter to your needs. The next one, prompt upsampling, is a very interesting parameter because it turns out that everything we've discussed earlier about prompting can almost be ignored. Instead of that huge block of text, I can literally put in 3 sentences that best describe what I want to create and enable the prompt upsampling flux context. It will then interpret my basic prompt, expanding it into a long prompt. However, I won't be able to see it, and it will be hard for me to control how flux context works, so prompt upsampling isn't always the best choice. Personally, I like to turn off prompt upsampling and work with my own long prompt. If you think differently, it's worth enabling prompt upsampling, but in that case, use short prompts. The output format is PNG by default. You can change it to JPG, but I don't see the point. JPG will be a bit compressed. So I would stick with the original PNG. I can optionally enter a seed. I need a moment here to explain. When creating 4 images in flux context, it's a bit like rolling a die 4 times. The generations are completely random, and if you enter the same prompt and click generate, you'll get 4 entirely different results. That's the nature of generative artificial intelligence. If we wanted to get the same result together, we would have to enter exactly the same seed. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4. It simply means a specific roll of the dice. We can repeat it together. You and I will roll the same number with the same dice. I hope this metaphor is clear to you. But don't worry about the seed, let's just ignore it completely. I'm setting 2 images for safety tolerance again. I can reduce it to 4, and with these settings, I'll generate. Right from the start, you can see that the image has the proportions I set and follows the prompt perfectly. This is the Max model, which, according to Black Forest Labs, is better than the Pro model. We can check that. I have a specific seed that I can use. I copy it, close the generation, and change the model to Pro in the settings. In the seed field, I paste the specific number and also set the prompt upsampling safety tolerance. We had it set to 4. It's the same prompt, still 3 by 4 in terms of proportions, and we generate again. Let's see if these 2 images will differ that much from each other. Well, okay, the difference is noticeable. Max probably handles details better, but I wouldn't call it a landslide. These models are just different. In the rest of the course, I'll be using the Pro model, which in my opinion is sufficient. As for the settings, that's all for now. In the next lesson, we'll cover a very interesting topic, generating textures. Before I move on to the more interesting, at least in my opinion, Edit tab. While still in the Generate tab, I want to show you a very interesting workflow that involves creating textures using images. I drop this chair into the flux context and enter a prompt, which you can find in the supplementary materials attached to this course. It's a simple instruction that helps extract a texture from an image. It uses keywords: flat, orthographic, seamless texture, and map. All of them suggest a certain pattern. Prompt upsampling is turned off. The aspect ratio is 1:1. And this is the moment when, for once, I'll use the Max model. Here, quality will really matter. Make sure the settings haven't changed after switching the model like they did for me. So again, 1:1, Barska is 4, great, and I'm generating. Okay, even though I selected 1:1 in the aspect ratio, I ended up with rather vertical images. It would be worth repeating this process, but I'll try to avoid that. The third image resembles what I wanted to achieve. The pattern is exactly the same as on the chair. Despite the aspect ratio errors, Flux Context handled this task exceptionally well. Maybe let's tweak it a bit more. I select Expand from the 3 dots and change the resolution to square. Let the proportions be square, then I shrink my texture a bit and center it. The pattern will be much larger. As you can see, I have even more options to choose from here and a different model as well. Maybe we'll deal with that at the end. For now, I'm just generating without even adding any prompt. I hope Flux Context will get what I mean. Okay, here it is. I'm getting the result in a slightly different form than before, but basically the task has been accomplished. When generating locally with Comfy UI, we can also use a circular variational autoencoder, which means the generated texture can even be seamless. But that's a topic for another time. This is a chapter devoted to the basics, so let's end it here. The most important thing is that in the Flux context, specifically under the Generate tab, you can effortlessly create textures based on any given images. So if you want to download a specific upholstery or use a texture that the manufacturer doesn't provide, now you have a great solution.